Hello everybody, Michael the Librarian of Magic, finding and cataloging the magical and pointing you to it. Today is October 9th, and I have yet another Disney villain drawing for you today. This one I'm really excited about because it's one of my favorites, and it's based on a fun story that I also really love. So I'm going to get right to it. I hope you enjoy checking out Brom Bones from 1949's The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad from the Legend of Sleepy Hollow segment. As you can see in the picture, this is based on the scene where he is entertaining everybody with telling the Headless Horseman story. In the script there, I decided to include part of his little song slash story speech that says, "So when you're riding home tonight, make for the bridge with all your might. He'll be down in the hollow there. He needs your head. Look out. Beware." I just thought that was a nice little embellishment. So that's him kind of relishing in telling the tale about the Headless Horseman. Brom Bones, it was originally in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, the short story, which is always one of my Halloween time favorites. In the short story, he's not particularly villainous, per se. He is just, the town, everybody in the town kind of loves him. He's a strapping physical guy, and he has eyes for Katrina Van Tassel, but he's not nearly as adversarial with Ichabod in the short story. Ichabod is kind of a creep in the short story. He's kind of a jerk. It's very obvious that he is using his status as a teacher to take advantage of everybody in town by getting free food and trying to, have eyes for Katrina is sort of a jerk move because he's trying to ingratiate himself with the wealthy farmer Baltus Van Tassel and try to marry his daughter. He's basically just trying to get himself ahead in life. And Brom Bones is trying to do the same, but he's more of a local guy. He sort of works hard and all of that kind of stuff. He's a little bit more virtuous in the story, and certainly in the story more virtuous than Ichabod. Whereas in the film version, he kind of picks on Ichabod a little bit, and he's a little bit more adversarial. He's kind of a Gaston type. In fact, I think I read somewhere that Gaston was sort of based a little bit on Brom Bones, where he's sort of beloved in the town, and he's a strapping guy, and he's kind of a jerk to Ichabod for having eyes for Katrina Van Tassel. So it basically comes about that, on this Halloween night, they have this party where everybody in the town goes, and he's trying to impress Katrina, and so is Ichabod, and Ichabod kind of gets the best of Brom for a while. Ichabod's a great dancer and impresses Katrina, and Brom isn't as much, and so he kind of gets annoyed. But at one point during a dinner sequence, Brom Bones notices Ichabod knocking over a salt shaker and throwing salt over his shoulder, and he realizes that Ichabod is superstitious, so then he embellishes the story of the Headless Horseman to try to frighten Ichabod away from Katrina. Well, as it turns out, on that night, Ichabod does have a encounter with the Headless Horseman. I did another video in the first season 1 of this series of the Headless Horseman, if you'd like to see that. And of course, Ichabod is never seen again after that. Now, again, as I posited in that other video, was it Brom Bones in disguise? Was the Headless Horseman real? Did Ichabod just skip town out of fear? Was he really taken or killed by the Headless Horseman in the night? What happened? You decide. Let me know down below what you think. Was Brom Bones a nice guy? Was he framed? Was he a jerk? Did he go dress up as the Horseman and scare Ichabod? It says in the end, I believe, that rumors spread that Ichabod left town, but no one in town believed that he did. They were all on the Headless Horseman theory. But anyway, that's kind of the gist of the story. Everybody sort of knows about Brom Bones, or about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. In the story, too, by the way, his Brom Bones is a nickname. His original name is Abraham Van Brunt. So that's kind of an interesting detail that I actually didn't remember from the story or didn't know, even though I've read it several times. Another little tidbit about Brom Bones is his horse. He has a horse that he rides around in a lot in the film, and it's called Daredevil. So that's a little tidbit there. His horse is named Daredevil. So in case you're ever at a Disney trivia event or something, that would be a deep cut trivia question. Principally, he was designed and animated for this by a legendary group of animators, a good chunk of the Nine Old Men, Ollie Johnston, Milt Kahl, Frank Thomas, who I've talked about before, and there's a great documentary about both Frank and Ollie called Frank and Ollie. They were best friends, and they ended up buying houses next to each other and lived out their retirement life next door to one another. They were a very awesome pair of friends. And then another person who worked on this was Wolfgang Reitherman, who was also one of the Nine Old Men. And that's a huge chunk. That's four out of the five. And I mention them so often, and they are so important to the history of the Disney company and the history of animation that I'll probably have to do a Nine Old Men video at one point and talk about all of them. At one point or another, I've probably mentioned each one of their names, but yeah, it would be worthwhile to probably talk about them in a little bit more detail. But all of those guys worked on this. This is right in the heart of, kind of the heyday of the golden age of Disney Studios. So they were all there. The Brom Bones was voiced by Bing Crosby, the famous singer and entertainer. Ichabod was also voiced by Bing. Bing was the narrator in this short, and so basically he sort of tells the story and does the voices for the entire thing. So he kind of sings the songs and does the little voiceovers. But yeah, Bing Crosby, of course, is very famous. Most people know him from listening to White Christmas. A little tidbit I found out about that as I was researching this video is that White Christmas is still to this day the best-selling single of all time, with over 50 million copies. So that's pretty much evidence that most people, if not everybody, has heard White Christmas, the Bing Crosby version. And of course, the film that he was in based on the song White Christmas is probably a little bit lesser known than the song itself, but I would encourage you to check that one out. That's a Christmas favorite of mine, with Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye and Rosemary Clooney. It's a great, heartwarming movie. So yeah, Bing Crosby really did the bulk of the work on this one. Besides just voicing Brom Bones and Ichabod, he kind of narrated the whole thing. This was pretty much the only other Disney thing that Bing Crosby ever did. He was considered for the role of Baloo in The Jungle Book, as well as Thomas O'Malley, the Alley Cat, in The Aristocats, but ultimately both of those roles went to Phil Harris instead of Bing Crosby, who also I've mentioned before in other videos about The Jungle Book and stuff like that. So that's kind of the interesting thing about the voiceover stuff and who came up with the character. This is a great oddball little film. It's one of Disney's package films, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, from that they kind of made during the war era, the World War II era, when a lot of resources were going into the war effort and money and stuff was tight at the studio. They kind of took these shorter projects and packaged them together into one, feature film. So they had the Mr. Toad and Ichabod stories, and they were kind of, like a half an hour-ish each, or 25, 30, 35 minutes each. And they weren't long enough to be a feature film on their own, but they just sort of crammed them together and made it into a feature-length film. And they did that several times with some of the musical-based movies like Melody Time and Fun and Fancy Free, The Three Caballeros. All of those movies kind of came out of the war years when things were lean, and those are what are called the Disney package films, which also I could probably do a whole video about that one day too, because that's sort of an interesting era in the history of the studio. But that's basically kind of some of the stuff I dug up on Brom Bones. It's a fun, weird little movie. It's great for watching this time of year. Reading the story of This Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving is always a treat. It's very funny, even though it was written in the late 1700s, early 1800s. It's very readable. It's very fun. So I would encourage that as well. I try to read it every year if I can. So this was a fun one to do. because it's a favorite of mine. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that this was informative and interesting and entertaining. Yeah, I'll be back tomorrow with another one of these. Today's was Brom Bones. Who knows what we got tomorrow? Well, I know, but you don't yet. So come on back tomorrow and see what I got up my sleeve for then. Until then, have a great day.